In the modern town of Agbori, life moved at a comfortable rhythm. Every morning, the streets slowly filled with market women spread out bright fabrics on wooden tables, selling tomatoes, peppers, and fresh fish. Motorcycle riders buzzed through the dusty roads, calling out to passengers. Children in neat school uniforms hurried past with laughter echoing in the air. Agbori was not a big town, but it was lively. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew about Oni's restaurant. At the center of the town stood a small building painted deep yellow with a red roof. From the outside, it looked simple, almost ordinary. But what made the place special was the smell. Every afternoon, a rich, mouth-watering aroma floated through the streets. The scent of pepper, spices, and slow-cooked meat drifted through the air like a promise. People could smell it from far away. "Ah, Oni must be cooking again," someone would say. And just like that, customers would begin walking toward the restaurant. Oni's restaurant had become the pride of Agbori. Travelers stopped there. Office workers lined up during lunch. Even people from nearby towns came just to taste her famous stew. Inside the restaurant, the room buzzed with happy chatter. Wooden tables were always full. Plates clinked. Laughter filled the air. But the star of the place was always the same dish, Oni's stew. It was thick, deep red, and rich with flavor. It tasted unlike anything anyone had eaten before. The spices blended perfectly with tender meat and soft vegetables. Just one spoonful made people close their eyes in delight. A customer would say, "This is the best stew I've ever tasted." Another would reply, "I swear, there is magic in this pot." Even the pickiest eaters loved it. Some people said Oni had learned the recipe from her grandmother. Others believed she had traveled across the country learning secret cooking techniques. But the truth was, no one really knew. Oni herself was a quiet woman. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a calm face that rarely showed emotion. She spoke politely to customers but never said much about herself. Whenever people praised her cooking, she would simply smile. "Thank you," she would say softly. "Come again tomorrow." And they always did. In fact, many people came every single day. Some customers even joked that they were addicted to her stew. "If I don't eat here for 2 days," a man once laughed, "I start dreaming about it." The workers also noticed something strange. The customers didn't just like the stew. They needed it. One afternoon, a young worker named Tunde was washing plates when he spoke quietly to another worker. "Have you noticed something?" he asked. "What?" the other boy replied. "People eat here every day, sometimes twice a day." The other worker shrugged. "So what? The food is good." Tunde nodded slowly, but something still bothered him. "Yes, but it's more than that." He glanced toward the kitchen door. "Sometimes it feels like they can't stop." Behind that door was Oni's kitchen. No one was allowed inside except her. Not the workers, not the customers, no one. Every morning, Oni arrived very early, long before the restaurant opened. She carried bags of ingredients into the kitchen and locked the door behind her. For hours, the sounds of cooking echoed inside. Chopping, grinding, boiling, stirring. By the time the workers arrived, the stew was already simmering slowly inside a large iron pot. And the smell alone was enough to make anyone hungry. Whenever someone asked about her recipe, Oni would just smile mysteriously. "A good cook must protect her secrets," she would say. At first, everyone found this charming. After all, many great chefs kept their recipes private. But as the months passed, the fame of Oni's restaurant grew even bigger. Soon, the place was always full. Lines of customers stretched outside the door. People waited patiently, eager for just one bowl of the famous stew. Some visitors traveled hours just to taste it. Agbori began appearing on food blogs and travel websites. the home of the most addictive stew in Nigeria, one article proudly claimed. The town was thrilled. Local business owners were also happy. The extra visitors meant more customers for everyone. Even the town leader, Chief Obinna, once visited the restaurant with important guests. After tasting the stew, he wiped his mouth with a satisfied smile. "Oni," he loudly said, "your cooking has brought great honor to Agbori." The restaurant erupted in applause. Oni bowed her head politely. "I am grateful, Chief." But behind her calm expression, something strange flickered in her eyes, something that no one else noticed. Not yet. That night, after the restaurant closed and the last customer had gone home, Oni returned to the kitchen alone. The building was silent. The workers had already left. Outside, the streets of Agbori were quiet under the glow of streetlights. Inside the kitchen, Oni stood by the large iron pot. The stew bubbled slowly. She looked around carefully to make sure no one was there. Then, she walked toward a small wooden cabinet hidden in the corner of the room. From inside it, she removed a small glass jar. The jar contained a dark substance, thick, strange. Oni stared at it for a moment. Then she whispered softly to herself, "This is why they keep coming back." She slowly opened the jar. The smell that escaped was sharp and unfamiliar. Carefully, very carefully, she poured a small amount into the stew. The pot hissed as the liquid disappeared into the red mixture. Oni picked up a long wooden spoon and began stirring, round and round, slowly, patiently. As the stew mixed with the secret ingredient, the smell in the kitchen changed. It became even richer, even more irresistible. Oni smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. "They will never stop coming," she murmured. Outside, the people of Agbori slept peacefully, dreaming of the delicious stew they would eat again tomorrow. But somewhere in the town, far away from the restaurant, an elderly woman named Mama Ife sat quietly on her porch. Mama Ife was known for something special. She noticed things other people missed. And lately, something about Oni's restaurant had begun to bother her. She looked out at the silent street and spoke softly to herself. In the weeks that followed, the fame of Oni's restaurant grew even stronger. Every day, the line outside her building became longer. People arrived earlier than before, some even waiting outside before the doors opened. Office workers rushed there during lunch breaks. Students passed by after school. Travelers stopped in Agbori just to taste the famous stew everyone was talking about. The restaurant had become the busiest place in town. Inside, the workers struggled to keep up with the endless stream of customers. "Table 3 needs another plate. More rice here. 2 more bowls of stew." Plates clattered, chairs scraped the floor, and the rich smell of the stew filled every corner of the room. Customers ate with excitement. Some even licked their fingers when they were done. But slowly, something unusual began to happen. People weren't just enjoying the stew anymore. They seemed unable to stay away from it. A man named Bayo, who worked at a nearby electronics shop, used to eat at Oni's restaurant once a week, but soon he began visiting every day. At first, his co-workers laughed about it. "Bayo, you should just move into that restaurant," one of them joked. Bayo laughed too, but inside, he knew something strange was happening. One afternoon, he tried to eat lunch somewhere else. He sat at a different restaurant and ordered jollof rice. But when the food arrived, he stared at it with disappointment. The taste felt dull, plain. Something was missing. He pushed the plate away. "I'm not hungry," he muttered. But the truth was different. His mind kept thinking about Oni's stew. By evening, he found himself walking straight to her restaurant again. The moment he tasted the stew, he felt satisfied, almost relieved. And Bayo wasn't the only one. All over Agbori, people were behaving the same way. Some customers came twice a day. Others spoke about the stew constantly. "You haven't eaten Oni's stew this week?" one woman asked her friend with shock. "How are you surviving?" Another man told his neighbor, "There's something special in that food. I swear it gives me energy." The strange obsession spread quietly through the town. Most people didn't question it. After all, good food could easily become a habit.
But one person began to notice patterns others ignored. Mama Ife. Mama Ife had lived in Agbori longer than almost anyone else. She had watched the town grow from a quiet village into the lively place it had become. She was known for her wisdom. People often came to her for advice about family problems, business troubles, or village matters. One afternoon, she sat under a large mango tree near the market, watching the crowd. Her sharp eyes followed the people passing by. Again and again, she saw the same thing. People walking quickly toward Oni's restaurant. Some looked excited.
Others looked restless, as if they were rushing towards something they needed. Mama Ife frowned. She turned to a young woman selling vegetables nearby. "Tell me," Mama Ife asked gently, "do you eat at Oni's restaurant often?" The young woman smiled immediately. "Oh yes, almost every day." Mama Ife raised an eyebrow. "Every day?" The woman nodded happily. "You must try it if you haven't. The stew is incredible." Mama Ife gave a slow nod. "Yes, I have heard many people say the same thing." Later that evening, Mama Ife decided to visit the restaurant herself. When she arrived, the place was packed. People filled every seat. Some even stood outside waiting for space. Mama Ife quietly entered and sat at an empty corner table. A worker soon approached her. "What would you like, Mama?" "One plate of rice and stew," she replied calmly. A few minutes later, the plate arrived. The stew looked rich and thick, just as everyone had described. Mama Ife picked up her spoon and tasted it. For a moment, she said nothing. The flavor was powerful, deep, complex. It was indeed one of the most delicious stews she had ever tasted. But as she swallowed, something about the flavor made her pause. It wasn't the spice. It wasn't the meat. It was something else, something she couldn't quite identify. Mama Ife slowly took another spoonful, then another. Her expression grew thoughtful. "This taste," she murmured quietly. She had cooked for most of her life. She understood spices, ingredients, traditional recipes. But this was different. As she continued eating, she noticed something else. Around her, customers seemed unusually focused on their food. The room was quieter than expected. People were eating quickly, almost eagerly, as if they didn't want the meal to end. Mama Ife finished half her plate and gently placed the spoon down. Her eyes drifted toward the kitchen door. It remained firmly closed. No worker entered, no worker left. Only Oni was allowed inside. Mama Ife's mind began connecting small details she had noticed over the past few weeks. The daily crowds, the strange obsession, the secretive kitchen. Something about it didn't feel right. When Oni finally stepped out of the kitchen carrying another pot of stew, Mama Ife studied her carefully. Oni moved calmly through the room, greeting customers with polite smiles. But Mama Ife noticed the way her eyes watched the people eating. It was not the proud look of a chef admiring her work. It was something colder, more calculating. For a brief moment, Oni's eyes met Mama Ife's. The two women stared at each other across the room. Oni's smile faded slightly. Mama Ife simply nodded politely. But inside her mind, a quiet thought formed. There is more to this food than people realize. After finishing her meal, Mama Ife paid and slowly walked home through the evening streets. The air was cool. The town was peaceful. But her thoughts refused to rest. "People don't behave like this over ordinary food," she muttered. She stopped walking and looked back toward the distant glow of Oni's restaurant. A faint smell of stew still lingered in the air. Mama Ife narrowed her eyes. If something is hidden, it will eventually show itself. That same night, inside the restaurant kitchen, Oni once again stood alone beside her large iron pot. The stew simmered slowly. Just like before, she opened the small wooden cabinet and removed the glass jar. But this time, the jar was almost empty. Oni stared at it for a long moment. Her expression darkened. "So many customers," she whispered.
She tilted the jar carefully, letting the last drops fall into the stew.
As the weeks passed, life in Agbori began to change in subtle but worrying ways. At first, the changes were small enough that most people ignored them. But to someone observant like Mama Ife, they were impossible to miss. Every morning, the line outside Mi's restaurant grew longer. People stood there impatiently, shifting from foot to foot while waiting for the doors to open. Some customers even argued with each other about who had arrived first. One morning, two men nearly started a fight. "I was here before you," one shouted. "No, you weren't. Move back," the other snapped. The workers had to rush outside to calm them down. Inside the restaurant, the same pattern repeated every day. Customers finished their meals quickly, yet instead of leaving satisfied, many sat quietly staring at their empty plates, as if wishing for more. Others returned later in the evening for another serving. The stew had become more than just food. It had become a craving. Shop owners around town began noticing something strange too. People were spending less money elsewhere. One fruit seller complained loudly at the market. "Everyone saves their money for that restaurant now," she grumbled. "They don't buy fruit anymore." A baker shook his head in frustration. "I used to sell 50 loaves a day. Now, people just want stew." The entire town seemed to revolve around Oni's cooking. But not everyone was comfortable with it. Mama Ife had started paying closer attention. She watched the people, she listened to their conversations, and what she heard worried her. One afternoon, she sat on her porch while her neighbor, a middle-aged woman named Ada, visited. Ada looked tired, very tired. Mama Ife noticed immediately. "You look exhausted," Mama Ife said gently. Ada sighed. "I didn't sleep well." "Why not?" Ada hesitated. Then she laughed awkwardly. "It sounds silly, but I kept dreaming about Oni's stew." Mama Ife raised an eyebrow. "You dreamt about it?" Ada nodded. "And when I woke up this morning, it was the first thing I wanted." She shook her head. "I even skipped breakfast just so I could eat there." Mama Ife's expression grew serious. Ada continued speaking. "My husband says I talk about that stew all the time now." Mama Ife looked out toward the road thoughtfully. "You are not the only one," she said quietly. That evening, Mama Ife decided to visit the restaurant again. But this time, she didn't go inside. Instead, she sat across the street, watching. Customers came and went constantly. Some walked away smiling. Others returned only a few hours later. Mama Ife studied their behavior carefully. Something about it reminded her of people who had developed unhealthy habits, people who could not control their urges. But this was food. Food was supposed to nourish people, not control them. As she sat there thinking, a young boy approached the restaurant carrying a large delivery bag. Mama Ife recognized him. His name was Emeka, a teenager who often helped restaurants deliver food around town. He stepped inside and returned a few minutes later carrying several containers. Curious, Mama Ife called him over. "Emeka, come here." The boy smiled politely. "Good evening, Mama. Where are you taking that food?" she asked. "Delivery, 3 houses." Mama Ife tilted her head. 3 houses? "Yes." "From the same restaurant?" "Yes, Mama." Mama Ife leaned back slowly. Even deliveries had become common. People no longer wanted to wait in line. They wanted the stew brought straight to their homes. Mama Ife watched the boy walk away. Her suspicions deepened. Later that night, she decided it was time to speak with someone important. Someone who could help investigate properly. The next morning, Mama Ife visited the large house at the center of town where Chief Obinna lived. Chief Obinna was the respected leader of Agbori. He was known for his fairness and calm judgment in village matters. When Mama Ife arrived, the guards welcomed her inside immediately. Everyone respected her wisdom. Soon, she was seated across from the chief in his wide veranda. Chief Obinna smiled warmly. Mama Ife, it is always good to see you. And you, chief, she replied. A servant brought them tea. After a moment of polite conversation, Mama Ife spoke more seriously. I have come because something in this town troubles me. Chief Obinna leaned forward. What is it? Mama Ife paused. Then she said quietly, Oni's restaurant. The chief chuckled lightly. Ah, yes, her stew is famous now. Mama Ife did not smile. That is exactly the problem. The chief noticed her serious tone and sat up straighter. What do you mean? Mama Ife folded her hands. Have you noticed how people behave about that food? Chief Obinna thought for a moment. Well, people enjoy it. Yes, Mama Ife said slowly. But enjoyment is not the same as obsession. The chief frowned slightly. Mama Ife continued. People crave it constantly. They dream about it. They spend all their money there. They return again and again. She leaned closer. Tell me honestly, Chief, have you ever seen people behave like this over a simple stew? The chief was silent. The truth was, he had noticed something similar. Even during his own visit to the restaurant, he had found himself thinking about the stew for days afterward. But he had dismissed the thought. Now Mama Ife's words made him uneasy. What are you suggesting? He asked carefully. Mama Ife spoke firmly. I believe something about that food is not natural. The chief looked toward the horizon, thinking deeply. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. If there is something wrong, we must find out. Mama Ife's eyes sharpened. Exactly. Chief Obinna stood up. I will speak with the town council. Quietly. Mama Ife rose as well. For now, the chief continued, we must observe carefully. Mama Ife gave a small approving nod. Yes. But neither of them knew just how disturbing the truth would be. Because at that very moment, inside her kitchen, Oni stood beside the iron pot once again. The stew bubbled slowly. But this time, she opened the cabinet and stared at the empty jar. Her face tightened. It's finished, she whispered. For a moment, she stood still. Then slowly, a strange smile appeared on her face. If the ingredient is gone, I will simply get more. Outside, the peaceful town of Agbori continued its daily life. But a storm of truth was quietly approaching. And when it arrived, everything would change.
After our conversation with Chief Obinna, Mama Ife felt certain of one thing. The mystery surrounding Oni's restaurant had to be uncovered, but it had to be done carefully. If they accused Oni without proof, the people of Agbori would never believe them. The town loved her food too much. Many would defend her without question. So, Mama Ife and the chief agreed on a simple plan. They would watch first. They would listen carefully. And when the time was right, they would act. For the next several days, Chief Obinna quietly asked a few trusted members of the town council to observe the restaurant. Nothing official, no public announcement, just quiet observation. What they noticed quickly confirmed Mama Ife's worries. Customers behaved strangely. Some arrived twice a day. Others spent more money than they could afford just to eat there. One council member reported something unusual. I saw a man who looked angry because the stew had finished, he said during a private meeting. What happened? The chief asked. He begged the workers to check the kitchen again. He said he needed another bowl. Mama Ife sighed. That is not normal behavior. Another council member added something else. I also spoke with a former worker from the restaurant, he said. The room became quiet. What did the worker say? Chief Obinna asked. The worker said Oni never allows anyone inside the kitchen. Mama Ife nodded slowly. That part I already knew, But then, the council member continued. The worker also said something else. He lowered his voice. Sometimes, late at night, Oni is still cooking. Mama Ife's eyes narrowed. Late at night? Yes. Chief Obinna frowned. What would she be cooking when the restaurant is closed? No one had an answer. Mama Ife leaned forward. There is only one way to know. The chief understood immediately. You want to see the kitchen? Mama Ife nodded. Yes. The plan they formed that evening was simple but risky. They would visit the restaurant after closing time, not to break in, but to observe what happened inside when everyone else had gone home.
2 nights later, the town of Agbori was quiet under the dark sky. Most houses had turned off their lights. Dogs barked occasionally in the distance, and the streets were almost empty. Near Oni's restaurant, 2 figures moved slowly in the shadows, Mama Ife and Chief Obinna. They stood across the road, watching the building carefully. The restaurant lights were off. The workers had already left hours earlier, but one small light still glowed inside the kitchen. Mama Ife pointed. She's still there. The chief nodded. They quietly moved closer, staying hidden behind a large mango tree near the side of the building. From there, they could see a small kitchen window. The window was partly open. Soft sounds came from inside, the bubbling of stew, the clinking of metal, and the slow movement of a spoon stirring a pot. Mama Ife and the chief stepped closer, careful not to make noise. Then they looked through the window. Inside the kitchen, Oni stood beside her large iron pot. The stew was simmering slowly, but what caught their attention was something else. On the table beside her lay several strange items, bundles of dried herbs, small dark bottles, and a large cutting board. Oni moved calmly as she prepared something. She picked up one of the bottles and poured a dark liquid into the stew. Then she stirred the pot slowly. Chief Obinna whispered, "That could just be seasoning." Mama Ife didn't respond. Her eyes stayed fixed on Oni. Then something happened that made both of them freeze. Oni walked to a corner cabinet and opened it. From inside, she removed a cloth bundle. The bundle looked heavy, very heavy. She placed it on the table and slowly untied the cloth. The chief and Mama Ife leaned closer to see. Inside the cloth was something dark, something thick. Oni picked up a knife and began cutting small pieces from the bundle. Mama Ife felt a chill run down her spine. The pieces did not look like ordinary meat. The color was wrong. The texture was strange. Chief Obinna whispered nervously, "What is that?" But Mama Ife's face had turned pale. She had lived long enough to recognize many things, and what she was seeing made her stomach twist. "This is worse than I feared," she murmured. Inside the kitchen, Oni carefully dropped the pieces into the bubbling stew. The pot fizzed softly. Then she stirred slowly, calmly, like someone performing a routine she had done many times before. Mama Ife grabbed the chief's arm gently. "That stew is not what people think it is." The chief looked horrified. "You mean?" Mama Ife shook her head. "We must not jump to conclusions yet," but her voice trembled slightly. They continued watching quietly. After a few minutes, Oni wiped her hands and looked around the kitchen. For a moment, it seemed like she sensed something. She walked toward the window. Mama Ife and the chief quickly stepped back into the shadows. Their hearts pounded as Oni paused near the window. She looked outside briefly. Then, satisfied that no one was there, she returned to the pot. Mama Ife whispered, "We have seen enough." Chief Obinna nodded. Yes. Both of them knew what had to happen next.
The truth needed to be revealed, but it had to be done carefully. If they accused Oni without proof, the people of Agbori might refuse to believe them. Mama Ife took a deep breath. "Tomorrow," she said firmly, "we confront her." Chief Obinna looked back at the glowing kitchen window one last time. Inside, Oni continued stirring the pot calmly,
as if nothing in the world was wrong. But by the next day, the entire town of Agbori would learn the truth. And when they did, Oni's famous stew would never be served again. The next morning in Agbori felt normal. The sun rose slowly over the town. Market sellers arranged their goods, children walked to school, and the smell of cooking food drifted through the air. And as always, a line began forming outside Oni's restaurant. People chatted excitedly while waiting for the doors to open. "I hope I get a big portion today," one man said. "I came early so the stew doesn't finish before my turn," another added. To them, it was just another day. But across the street, Mama Ife stood quietly beside Chief Obinna. Several respected members of the town council were with them. Their faces were serious. The chief spoke calmly. "Today we find the truth." Mama Ife nodded. "Yes, and the people must see it with their own eyes." Soon the restaurant doors opened. Customers rushed inside and filled the tables as usual. Workers hurried to serve rice and stew. Within minutes, the familiar sounds of eating and conversation filled the room. Everything looked normal. But then, the large wooden doors opened again. Chief Obinna stepped inside. Behind him were Mama Ife and several council members. The room immediately fell quiet. Whenever the town leader entered a place like that, it usually meant something important was about to happen. Oni emerged from the kitchen when she heard the sudden silence. She saw the chief and smiled politely. "Chief Obinna," she said, "this is an honor. Would you like a meal?" But the chief did not smile. Instead, he spoke firmly. "Oni, we need to speak with you." The customers looked around in confusion. Oni's expression remained calm. "Of course," she replied. "What is the matter?" Mama Ife stepped forward. "It concerns your stew." Murmurs spread across the restaurant. One customer laughed nervously. "What about this stew? It's the best food in town." Another customer nodded bitterly. "Yes, if anything, we should be praising her." But Mama Ife raised her hand. Silence. Her voice carried a quiet authority that commanded attention. She turned back to Oni. "For months, the people of Agbori have been eating your food." Oni nodded. "Yes, but something about it has troubled me." Oni's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't understand." Mama Ife spoke slowly. "You keep your kitchen completely private. No one is allowed inside." "That is my choice," Oni replied. Mama Ife continued. "And yet, people who eat your food become strangely obsessed with it." A few customers shifted uncomfortably. Some laughed it off. "It's just good cooking," someone said. But Chief Obinna stepped forward. "Last night," he said firmly, "we saw what happens inside your kitchen." The room went completely silent. Her calm expression flickered for the first time. "What do you mean?" she asked. The chief pointed toward the kitchen. "Bring the pot." Gasps filled the room. The workers hesitated, unsure what to do. Finally, Oni slowly walked back into the kitchen. Moments later, she returned carrying the large iron pot. The smell of the famous stew immediately filled the air. Some customers even smiled. But Mama Ife stepped forward. "Place it on the table." Oni did. Mama Ife looked at the crowd. "People of Agbori, you deserve to know what you have been eating." She turned back to Oni. "Show us the ingredients." Oni crossed her arms. "My recipe is private." Chief Obinna's voice hardened. This is no longer a request. The tension in the room grew thick. Finally, Oni let out a slow breath. Then she laughed quietly. It was not a friendly laugh. It was cold. "So you want the truth?" she said. Her eyes moved across the room, at the many customers who had made her famous, at the people who could never stop coming back. She shook her head. "You all loved it so much." A nervous murmur spread through the crowd. Oni slowly walked to the kitchen door again. She returned with a small wooden box. Setting it on the table, she opened it. Inside were the strange bottles and bundles that Mama Ife had seen the night before. People leaned closer, confused, uneasy. Mama Ife pointed. What is in those bottles? Oni smiled slightly. Something that keeps people coming back. The room erupted with shocked whispers. Chief Obinna spoke sharply. What exactly have you been putting in the stew? For a moment, Oni said nothing. Then she answered calmly. Something that affects the mind. Gasps filled the room. You poisoned us, someone shouted. Oni shook her head. Not poison. She tapped one of the bottles. A powerful mixture of herbs and chemicals that create cravings. The crowd began shouting angrily. You tricked us! You made us addicted! Oni raised her voice. You all kept coming back. I only gave you what you wanted. But Mama Ife pointed toward the cloth bundle inside the box. And that? She asked quietly. Oni's smile faded. Slowly, Mama Ife opened the cloth. Inside were pieces of dark, strange meat. The crowd stepped back in horror. Chief Obinna's face turned pale. What is that? Oni said nothing. And her silence was enough. People began shouting in fear and anger. How could you do this? You fed us this? Some customers pushed away their plates in disgust. Others looked sick. Mama Ife closed the cloth carefully. Her voice was calm but heavy. You allowed greed to blind you. Oni stared back at her. I built the most successful restaurant in this town. Yes, Mama Ife said, but you did it through deception. Chief Obinna raised his hand to silence the room. Oni, he said firmly, you will answer for what you have done. Guards who had been waiting outside entered the restaurant. They stepped forward and stood beside Oni. The once famous chef looked around the room one last time, at the angry crowd, at the customers who once praised her cooking. Her success had vanished in a single moment. As the guards led her away, the restaurant fell into stunned silence. No one spoke. No one touched the food anymore. Finally, Mama Ife addressed the people. Let this be a lesson for all of Agbori. The crowd listened quietly. When someone seeks success through greed and shortcuts, the truth will always reveal itself. She looked toward the empty doorway where Oni had been taken. And when that truth appears, the consequences cannot be escaped. From that day forward, Oni's restaurant remained closed. The building stood empty for years. People in Agbori returned to eating simple, honest meals from trusted cooks. And whenever someone in the town was tempted to cheat or deceive others for success, the elders would remind them of the story of Oni's stew. A story that warned every generation of the same truth. Greed may bring quick success, but honesty is the only path that lasts.